Hey, what's up? The last video I did wasn't satisfied with the sound, so I'm just gonna have to redo this whole video, but that's okay. So basically, I just want to redo this video about my mom, and I want to tell the story about my mom, and my mom leaving China just before the Cultural Revolution, and what it was like growing up in communist China when the Communist Party was getting started. So my mom never really talked about her history my whole life. That's a long time to not know anything about your mom. So a couple years ago I asked her to write me kind of like a story, an essay, just saying some things about her life. And so she wrote this essay for me, just giving her life story, and I'll read that to you. So my mom was born in 1946 in Suzhou, China. This is a town with some beautiful world-famous rock gardens that are thousands of years old. She had an older sister and a twin sister and a younger brother, and it was really dire at that time. A lot of people were barely getting enough food to survive. The government gave you food tickets that limited how much food you could get, so my mom's mother had to go to the store really early in the morning and get in a long line for food. They had to use lard oil for lotion, and government officials always came to your household to see what you were eating and to listen to your conversations. It was a time of a lot of mistrust between neighbors, so there was a lot of spying going on, and you had to be loyal to the party, and people would come to your house and really try to see if you were disloyal to the party. So it was a really scary time. You can see some of that in a show called The Three Body Problem on Netflix. It's based on a science fiction book by a Chinese author, and there's some scenes that kind of depict what was happening during the Cultural Revolution. And I think that's the only depiction of that history that I've seen in Western media, so it's pretty interesting to check out. So, as kids, my mom had to learn to grow sunflowers to make oil, and they collected metal from the streets for the government. So the government would issue an order telling kids to collect metal on the street because they needed the metal. My mom's father worked for a shipping company. When my mom was 3, he left on a boat, which took about 6 months to get back home. When the communists occupied China, they closed the doors to the country, and he wasn't allowed to come back. So my mom didn't see her dad from age 3 to age 12. There was very little communications. My mom's dad would maybe send them money, maybe every couple of months. So my mom and her mother had to pawn items, and my mom's mother worked in bookkeeping and knitting sweaters to make ends meet. So my mom's mother's family was actually a quite wealthy textile family, but when the communists took over, they took away the business. And so she would have a suitcase filled with clothing material. And at that time, people only wore black and gray because colorful materials were probably confiscated by the government. So my mom's family had no income without her dad. So many nights my mom remembers her family would be cutting bed sheets to make shoe soles so they could sell shoes. My mom's mother applied for a visa and approval to go to Hong Kong to meet with my mother's father, my grandfather, after 10 years, and it got approved. So the government had a rule where you had to leave one of the kids behind. So my mom's sister, by this time, she had become a communist patriot, so she kind of bought the party line, and she volunteered to stay behind. So basically my mom and her family had to leave their older sister behind. My mom's mother promised to come back for her one day, but it never happened. So my mom's older sister never got to see her mother again. When they left China, my mom and her twin sister had gold rings confiscated at the port by officials. My mom's mother had to sit on a bench while they were traveling and not lay down for 3 days. So when they got to Hong Kong, my mom had a lot of experiences of seeing things that she's never seen before. So this is the first time she saw men in ties and business suits. She said she thought they looked very handsome. She also saw a television for the first time, and she said Hong Kong was really pretty when you saw all the houses lit from across the ocean. So then they took a boat to Taiwan. My mom went to a refugee school in Macau. The classrooms were only separated by iron wires, so she could hear everything in the classes next door. It was my mom's first time seeing a dog too, and she was chased by the dog, and she was afraid of dogs till she got to America. After Macau, my mom went to Taiwan with her mother and brother via steamboat. It was 1958. When they got to Taiwan, they saw their dad for the first time in 10 years. My mom's brother saw his dad for the first time. He was 9 years old. He had never seen his dad before. So then they stayed in Taiwan, and they had to study for an entrance exam, which was really competitive. Meanwhile in China, people had been in a 3-year famine and the Cultural Revolution. The Great Chinese Famine happened in 1959 to 1961, and an estimated 30 million people starved to death. 30 million people. My mom's mother had left her daughter behind, and she had become very depressed. The older sister that was left behind, I think my mom's mother was feeling really guilty about that. Meanwhile, my grandfather was transferred to work in Tokyo, Japan. My mom graduated from National Taiwan University and became a demographic analyst in a project with the UN. Then Taiwan withdrew from the UN. So at that time, it was a trend for college graduates to study abroad. So my mom decided to pursue a master's degree in agricultural economics at the University of Arizona at age 28. When she came to the US, to Tucson, she was at university, and she fell in with a Chinese Bible study group. The familial bond in the group helped her when she was in a foreign land. She was on a really strict budget. She didn't have much money. She tutored some American-born Chinese students in Chinese language and earned $28 a month. My mom said she was so hungry sometimes. She went to the student center, and she would look around and she'd see people drinking coffee and eating dessert. And she filled a cup of water and put 3 packets of sugar in the water to drink. And that's all she drank for some energy. When she left Tucson, she found out that she had actually gained money instead of spending it. This frugality she had really persisted into my life, for better or for worse. So after Tucson, my mom went to Lubbock to pursue a PhD in economics. She had a teaching assistant salary, so she worried less about money. They had a lot of roundtable discussions in the class, and my mom was too timid to join the discussions. An American student told my mom that her in-class discussion grades were all 0. She said she had realized her personality wasn't suitable to become an economist and changed her degree program to be a master's in economics. So in order to stay in the US, she had to find a work permit within 18 months. She had a job as an accounting clerk at a garage door shop. She also joined a Houston Chinese church. In 1979, my mom's mother had fallen ill and she went into a coma. So she was about to pass away, and my mom decided to quit her job to go back to Taiwan to say goodbye to her mother while she was in the hospital. So my mom's mother passed away. After the funeral, my mom went to Tokyo to accompany her father. After a year, she received a letter from American Institute in Taiwan saying she could interview for a green card. But first, she had to prove she was not deported. So she called her attorney, and he sent a note from US Immigration in just 2 weeks. The note said, "I went to immigration office and I waited 3 hours to receive this little note. If it is useful to you and you come back to the US, you can pay me the balance of $250. If you can't come back to the US, you don't have to pay me." So that was like a good Samaritan move by that attorney. And if he didn't do that, then I might not be here. Also, his normal rate was $1,800, but he only charged her $750. So she felt really lucky about this. My mom returned to America and returned to Houston in 1982. She studied at night classes to study to do the CPA exam. My mom met my dad at Chinese church, and I'll talk about that in a later video. So recently, I've been reading another book by a Chinese woman who had left China, and it was recommended to me by a friend, and it's called Wild Swans, and it's revealing some new questions that I can ask my mom about things that she didn't remember to tell me about in the essay. For example, you weren't allowed to be a gardener in communist China, so flowers were a very rare sight. So imagine that, imagine growing up and never seeing flowers. So that was kind of my mom's experience. She had grown up and she had barely remember seeing any flowers. Like maybe you'd see flowers in the wild from time to time, but you would never see flowers at someone's house because gardens were kind of discouraged as maybe a symbol of luxury or a symbol of excess. In a way, I feel like that's kind of a metaphor for my life and maybe the life of many other American-born Chinese. That generation had been conditioned to not value beauty. So imagine it's got to be hard because I value art and music, and my mom was conditioned to not value beauty. So the things that I wanted to do were not valued growing up. I think that was a big challenge that a lot of our generation of American-born Chinese had to go through. So that's about all I have to say about my mom. So in the next video, I'll talk a little bit more about my dad. Thanks for watching.